All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Great. And if you don't already have a beverage with you, we're going to be cheersing at some point. Make sure you have a beverage. Yay. Kelly, what is that beverage? That looks fancy.
I take my non-alcoholic bubbly very seriously. It's almost like a kombucha tea thing with bubbles, so it's really nice.
Oh, that's cool. All right. So I'm thinking we might have a couple more people trickle in, but it might be good to get things kicked off. How's that sound? Great. So let me stop the music there. So welcome, formal welcome to our book launch party for Dr. Amanda. Hooray! Yay! Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't gotten your beverage yet, please go get your beverage for our toast that's going to be happening later. So, welcome. If I don't know you and you don't know me, my name is Sarah Bueno, and I am the current Mission Circle lead or slash board president of the Right Use of Power Institute. And I'm so happy to be able to be here today to welcome everybody and celebrate this amazing occasion and to celebrate Dr. Amanda. If you are not very familiar with Rupi, I can share with you what our mission is. Use of Power is a dynamic, inspiring, and relational approach to the ethical use of power to promote well being, the common good, and right relationship. Through interactive tools and embodied self reflective processes, we inspire and support people to navigate power dynamics consciously and ethically with accountability, strength, and heart. We offer skills training, programs, resources, consulting, speaking, and coaching. So, we're all coming together from many different parts of the world. Some of us are out of town, that's me, in different places. And so we just want to take a moment to really gather our energy and take a collective breath together and just notice whatever is showing up for you in the present moment right now. So I'll just be silent for a moment, allow us to breathe together. Thank you so much. So now I introduce our guest of honor today, Dr. Amanda Aguilera. She is an author, psychotherapist, consultant, and facilitator passionate about power consciousness and conflict resolution. She currently serves as the executive director of the Right Use of Power Institute and is a sought after speaker and coach, guiding organizations and communities in co creating structures that support right relationship and generative communication. Based in Colorado and the USA, Dr. Aguilera enjoys hiking, traveling, reading, and spending time with her partner Steph as they raise their 3 kids. You can connect with her online at www.amandaaguilera.com, which I will put in the chat. So, take it away, Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all so much for being here today to celebrate with me. I am really excited to say that I finally got the physical copy of the book yesterday, so it's actually in my hands, which is really exciting. And then the rest of the copies are on their way. There's some sort of delay because of holidays and whatnot, but I was really thrilled to get my copy at least in time for this event. This book has been a long time coming. Almost 20 years ago, I met Cedar and began this journey, and little did I know it would lead me here. And I just want to say I wouldn't have written this book without the help and support and relationship of many different people, many of whom are here. And I want to just begin with reading the acknowledgments in the book because it feels important to honor those who have made this book possible before we even get started here. So this book would not have made it into manifestation without the loving support of several people, and of course, my well ancestors and spirit. First and foremost, to my partner, Steph, who juggled the household, kids, and pets, brought me food and words of encouragement, and was my biggest cheerleader throughout the entire process of writing. They pointed me to my own voice again and again when I had doubts or started to follow others' visions instead of my own. Thank you for your belief in me and the many ways you've supported my work. Sorry. Yeah. This book would not be here without you. Truly. And to my mentor, Dr. Cedar Barstow, all of the contents of this book exist because of the foundation you built over so many years. Sorry, I'm such a crier, y'all. So, as well as your willingness to mentor me. Thank you for your generous guidance. And maybe I should have done this at the end. Your generous guidance and support throughout this long journey that began long before I ever started writing this book. My hope is that this, oh goodness. My hope is that this work will amplify yours and honor your legacy. And to the Right Use of Power community, to you all, thank you for continually asking me to write it all down. I'm in deep gratitude for your willingness to learn with me and help me to grow. Your engagement with the Right Use of Power material was the sharpening stone I needed to clarify my thoughts. You were the inspiration to develop this work further than I had ever imagined. And to my beta readers, especially Veronica Borganovi and Cedar, thank you for getting through the massive manuscript that was once this book, which at the end is like 449 pages. And before that, thank you for the edits and insights, and most especially for your willingness to challenge me. And finally, to my well ancestors and spirit, for your guidance and patience with me as I avoided this calling and came back to it again and again. Your presence is what gave me the courage to write and publish this book. Thanks for bearing with me as I read that. It felt important to begin there. Yeah. And so I want to just say that the book is the manifestation of my thinking on power and my lessons in relationship over the course of the past couple decades. And writing this was one of those things I had to do. And while it took the better part of 2 decades to think through these concepts, the actual writing of the book only took about 1.5 years because it was really ready to arrive. And what a timely arrival. There's so many misuses of power in the world right now, but I also see so many beautiful expressions of it as well. And this book is a celebration of the beautiful ways we can participate in social power dynamics. And it also became a guide for navigating the misuses of power that we all participate in one way or another. And it's an acknowledgement of that power can be used for good. And also that power is something that we participate in all the time in every relationship. And an honest acknowledgement that we all misuse our power. So this was an exploration into that. And so some of the key things I tried to accomplish with the book was, one, to challenge the binary. And by that, I mean to challenge the idea that there's a right and a wrong, and that we have to choose one. Even though right use of power uses the word right, and I use the word right relationship in the book, it definitely doesn't refer to the binary of right and wrong. It means finding that nuanced place that's in between and giving up the idea that we're able to avoid wrongdoing all the time or able to just be in right relationship all the time. I think believing that there's some perfect place to get to is part of what leads us into places that don't allow us to find right relationship. That perfectionism actually leads to a sense of shame or a sense of I'm not good enough, which just gets in the way, just causes static. The other thing is I wanted to shift our understanding of power so that it could include more nuance. I really feel like the way that dominant culture understands power is very crude. It's seen as an object to possess instead of a dynamic between us. And I really wanted to explore that nuance and expand it for us so that we can participate in it with more consciousness. The other thing that I wanted to do is share the ways I found for navigating power dynamics in that complexity. And in so doing, I wrote, I don't know, probably 1,000 pages of content because there's just so much there. And Cedar and I often talk about the fact that even though this has been our life's work, and even though we think about it and talk about it and teach it all the time, there's still so much we don't know. And there's still so much that we're learning. This is truly like a lifelong journey. And I tried to capture some pieces, but it's certainly just a few of the many concepts available in that field of study. And then the other thing I wanted to accomplish with the book is really emphasize the whole purpose of learning about power from a right use of power lens, which is to find our way to right relationship. That's really the point, right? The point of doing this study is so that we can continue to find right relationship with ourselves and each other. So on that note, I want to share just a couple pages of one of the chapters called Right Relationship. And it's the chapter that frames the entire book. And I had it bookmarked, but then I lost it. Oh dear. Here we go.
This is another opportunity for people to go grab their beverages if they haven't grabbed them yet for the toast later.
Thank you. And this chapter begins with a couple of quotes. And I would love to ask for a couple of volunteers for 2 people to each read one. One is a quote by Audre Lorde, and the other is a quote by Bayo Akamale. Any volunteers?
Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly.
Which one would you like to learn?
You can pick.
I'll go with the times are urgent. Let us slow down. What if the way we respond to crisis is part of the
Yes. Without community, there is no liberation. But community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist.
Thank you. So throughout the book, I put 2 or 3 quotes at the beginning of each chapter, which is often done in books. But for me, it really provided a framing and inspiration for the writing of each of the chapters. And these 2 kind of captured the dynamic I wanted to emphasize with right relationship, which is one, we can't find right relationship without an acknowledgement of our differences and an acknowledgement of the power dynamics that are present. We also can't find relationship without finding our own kind of personal power. And the other thing I realized with right relationship is that you can't be in a hurry. And so even though the times are urgent, what's being called for is that we actually slow down, which is really hard to do in this context, isn't it? Okay, so I'm going to read the first couple pages of this chapter. It's important that we begin with what our journey is pointed to, which is right relationship. The whole point of this book is not to talk about power for power's sake. It's about how we can use the power we have access to so that we can show up differently in our relationships and in the world. If we aren't trying to make our way toward right relationship, learning about power from my perspective is pointless at best, dangerous at worst. At the same time, we can't make it to right relationship without understanding social power dynamics and becoming power conscious. For example, if I do not understand, or at least try to understand, the oppression you experience and the ways I unconsciously participate or consciously participate in that, you and I cannot be in right relationship, no matter how well-intentioned I am. The same is true for all of us. Right relationship is the place we come to when we are continuously aiming toward connection, and that we are honoring the dignity of life in whomever we are connecting with, ourselves, with each other, with the more than human beings, and with that which is greater, however you define that: God, the universe, source, great mystery, collective consciousness, the divine, the higher self. Right relationship demands something more courageous: the simultaneous honoring of personal dignity and the messy truth of how power actually moves between people. It is a call for discernment, even if it means consciously ending the relationship or creating clear boundaries. Boundaries, whether leaving a job that erodes your dignity or ending a friendship steeped in misuses of power, are not failures of connection, but honest ones. They create space for relationships that honor rather than diminish our humanity. Ultimately, right relationship is not a fixed destination, but a way of traveling, a commitment to move through the world with eyes wide open to both our own power and the invisible currents shaping every interaction. It asks us to hold two truths at once: I matter, and I am not the only one that matters. Who matters? This delicate balance is where real connection begins, not in the absence of power dynamics, but in their honest acknowledgement. Why does this matter? Because our relationships and the power dynamics within them create our world. This is the potential of right relationship that bring justice and liberation alive as both a personal practice and a collective lifeline. In a world fractured by domination over people, land, and even life itself, it offers a way forward, not through power's elimination, but through its ethical engagement. So that's just a piece of that right relationship chapter. And it refers to one of the concepts that Cedar taught us, which is power. Trying to ignore power or trying to get rid of power is actually not possible, and it can be quite dangerous. So it's not that power is the problem, it's how we're engaging with it. So this book is really an exploration of that. I think that is all I want to say for now about the book. And I'm going to pass it to Sarah.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so in a little bit, we're going to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions or want to think of any questions, be percolating with that in the background. But first, we're going to do a little activity together. So I have a question that I'm going to put in the chat, but don't race to answer it just yet. I'm going to tell you all the instructions first. So the question is, what is one word that describes the type of power that you want to shape in 2026? So what we're going to do is we're going to have everybody write the word in the chat, but not hit return or enter yet. We're going to have everybody write it in the chat, and then I'm going to count us down for a 3, 2, 1. And then we're all going to hit enter at the same time and just watch a waterfall of all of these beautiful words of how we want to shape our power coming through. So we'll give you just a minute to ponder on the word that you want to write in the chat. And then you can write it in there. But again, don't press enter yet. Don't send it yet. I'll count us down. So I'll turn the music back on for maybe just a minute or so we can think of our words. Okay, have folks thought about your word, written it down? I'm seeing thumbs up. Does anybody need more time? Okay. All right. Are we ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh, I love this. Ah, they're going so fast. Okay, let's read a couple. Amanda, you want to start?
Personal,
Courage,
sparkly,
generative,
embodied,
soulfully,
self-love,
fastidious,
courage,
fierce and tender,
mycelial,
balanced,
connection,
liminal,
slow,
compassionate,
exponentially,
respectful,
creative and collaborative,
collaborative,
compassionate and collaborative,
ethical,
dignity.
awareness. Oh, that was really
Beautiful.
fun. I've never done anything like that before. That was so cool. Okay, so now is Q&A time. So I have a question. I can kick us off while people, maybe if you want to put your questions in the chat. And I know you touched on this a little bit, but what, because right use of power has been around for a while since Cedar developed it. And I'm just curious about if you like really dig into the depth of the evolution of right use of power right now. I'm curious how you were framing that in the book. I
I
know it's a
framed
big
the
question.
evolution.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I talk specifically about the evolution of right use of power, actually, in the book, although I did begin with the right use of power's understanding of power and what I learned from that and the different types of power that use of power has named. Of course, Dr. Barstow is in the book, I don't know how many times, probably 13 times or something. But I think the evolution has gone from, Cedar really diving into personal and role power and in the context of therapy or the helping professions. And generally, I have expanded it into status, collective, and systemic power. And then collectively, we've also added universal power, which brings in that spiritual element, which has been foundational for my perspective and the evolution of my understanding. I think the universal power aspect has our connection with something that I think is foundational for using our power well and within all the other types of power. And I talk about this some when we teach, but basically, if we believe that systemic power is the biggest power, then we tend to feel powerless, right? And so being rooted in something that's bigger than systems gives us that strength and foundation to actually change those systems, to show up differently in our relationships. And I did not intend for this book to be spiritual at all, as I name in the preface. I wanted it to be more of like a textbook on power. And then it just took on its own life, as it were.
Spirit had other plans, I guess.
Spirit had other plans for sure. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So Sari writes, oh, here they come. Sari writes, what did you learn about yourself in the writing process? Beautiful question.
Oh, so much. It's a vulnerable thing to put 450 pages of yourself out into the world, particularly about this subject, particularly in this time. And given my identities, right, as a white woman in the United States, to be writing about power is something that I had to reckon with continuously. So there was a lot of doubt, there was a lot of concern that I wouldn't do right use of power justice or Cedar justice or myself justice or spirit. And so I had to just keep relaxing back into my rooted self. I had to just keep letting go. Cedar was over at my house for Thanksgiving yesterday or Thursday. And we played this game afterwards where we ask each other questions. And her question was something like, when's the last time you surprised yourself? And my answer was, I feel like I surprise myself a lot, but it's mostly because when I'm connecting more and more to spirit, and I feel like spirit comes through and I'm surprised by what comes out, but it doesn't feel like me. And so that's it. It really was a calling into deeper relationship, mostly with myself and with my ancestors and spirit. That's really what it became. So what did I learn? That I'm not alone.
Beautiful. And we have, is it Rayanne, maybe? Curious how you consider abuse versus misuse of power and how you bridge and explain these terms in conversations with people less steeped in right use of power. I am a coercive control researcher in academia, and definitions around misuse of power are really challenging there. It's a very good question.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Oh, there's so much nuance here. It would probably take me half an hour to explain these differences. So let me see if or from my perspective, and I think Adrienne Marie Brown also explores these differences between conflict and abuse and misuses of power and what's harm and what's impact and I think at one point I created this continuum, the abuse misuse continuum. And on one end, you have misuses, which are more frequent and they're smaller, is how I think about them. And then abuses are more entrenched, more larger, and more damaging in a single blow. But it's actually the misuses that are more damaging because they're insidious, they're hard to point to. There's usually no laws around them. They're so subtle. And what they do is they build a normalization of misuse. And it's the normalization of misuse that then leads to the abuses, those larger challenges. I'm also curious how you define them. And I would love to have a conversation with you about that. So yeah, please, I would love to seriously have a conversation. So if you can get on my calendar, I would love that. I'll put my link in the chat.
Amazing. Reynold, or Ren, excuse me.
Yeah, either way. For me, the difference between misuse and abuse of power seems analogous in the law to misdemeanor versus felony. They're both versions of misbehavior, but one is, although, as you said, Amanda, over time, as they multiply, they become a diving board into something worse, or makes it easier for you to move from the misdemeanor to the felony. But it's really a difference in degree, which becomes a difference in kind, I think.
Thanks for
Sounds like we
sharing.
need to have a group discussion about it. Maggie
Yeah,
says,
any other questions that are coming up for folks? Curiosities about the book writing process, about the concepts?
oh
Yeah,
yes, Maggie.
Thank you. I just wanted to say it's an interesting exercise that I've done with work that I do with men who've misused power in their relationship. And this, when you talk about the misdemeanor versus felony, or how do you the abuse versus misuse, I do an exercise which I love, me a great big whiteboard, but put a mark at one end and a mark at the other. So ask the men themselves, what's the worst possible misuse of power? And let's put it down at that end. And then what is it's not okay, but it's not that big a deal. And so I have them, so usually murders at one end and maybe raising your voices at the other. And then I asked them where they'd put that on this sliding scale, if we said between 1 and 20. And it facilitates the most beautiful discussion with the men, because somebody will say, if I call my wife fat, and then where would you put that? And somebody say, oh, it's about a 4. And then another person will say, oh my word, if I called my partner fat, that would be like 12 out of 20. And it just facilitates this conversation that says part of misusing our power is the knowledge that we have and the vulnerabilities that our partners have shared with us over time. And so it's a very interesting, and eventually I just sit down and stop writing, and the conversation is with the men. My wife has told me 100 times she'd rather I hit her than berated her cooking or something like that. So I'll leave it at that, but I'd love to be part of a conversation about the difference between, because I think it's in part as well, intention versus impact.
Yeah. And what I'm hoping to have from the book too, I'm just a terrible reader. I'm waiting for the audiobook to come out, which hopefully I can be a part of helping create. But one of the things I want to think about around this is like the cultural shifts that need to be made. That right use of power is, we're, I think, midwifing in many ways the cultural understanding of power shifting, so that we don't have to have these conversations in the little group. This is something that we can talk about in larger spaces. I love this question. Cedar, is there a question that comes up for you?
It's just my overflowing pride and appreciation for the way, Amanda, you have gone about writing this and building on the work that I started and then we worked on even before the book arrived. You said the book arrived yesterday and showed me the picture with it in your hands. And I remembered that just crying with excitement and relief when I held the book I wrote in my hands for the first time. And I am full of appreciation for the way you have handled moving into being executive director and bringing so much depth and wisdom to phase 2 of right use of power. I couldn't be more proud and excited at what doors this will open. And also hearing, even in this room, the questions you're bringing and the ways we're talking about it. It's door, window, and roof opening. And I also am saying that right now because I've just been hired as an water exercise teacher at the Y. And my first class means that I have to leave in 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And I'm so excited about your new position at the Y. Teaching swim.
That sounds fun. Thanks, Cedar. And Amanda, we've got a question from Dr. Sherry Taylor in the chat. In that way that the spiritual teacher Buckner says, we are called by source to the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. How is this book a representation of your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger? How do you connect your own spiritual journey to the doulaing of this book into the world?
What a beautiful question. Dr. Sherry and I are friends and we meet regularly, and our conversations are always just such beautiful blossomings of different things that we're chewing on, and we're working on creating a podcast together. Hopefully it's okay that I say that, Sherry. And the title of the podcast is Staying in Conversation, because it's really about how we're avoiding the conversations and the relationships that we need to be having. Yeah, my deep gladness and the world's deep hunger. So in the preface, I talk about, I'd written the majority of the manuscript And then towards the end of the manuscript, I took my kids to see Moana 2 in the movie theaters. And I started crying, as I'm a crier, and I started crying about 2 minutes into the movie, and I did not stop crying until about an hour and a half after the movie was over, which is so silly even for me. I'm a crier, but that was like a lot. It was a lot. And I was like, okay, this is something I need to pay attention to. And the whole point of that movie was, it was this deep call of the ancestors that she was listening to. And I'm going to cry again, but it was the fact that she was supported in following that call by her entire community, even though it seemed huge and ridiculous and all of these things. Her entire community was like, yes, this is a good thing to do. Why don't you get in a boat and follow a myth that no one knows if it's true or not, and go across the ocean and see if you can bring together humanity? And there's something of this like achiness, this like grief and longing that I just feel in the collective, in the field, that really resonated. And I was like, oh, this book has to be different. And I needed to change course. And so then I added the whole concept of wayfinding, because some of the ideas in that movie, I was like, oh, this is how we find right relationship. It's not like here's the step one and here's step two and here, it's not a clear path. And so how do we listen to the things that aren't in writing, that aren't in a map, that aren't in rules or laws? Which really echoes what Cedar's original vision was she wanted an alternative class to ethics, where it's not just follow these rules and do these steps. It's how do you listen to the moment? How do you root into yourself? And then you can find what's right, what's ethical. And I feel like in the United States, especially in a lot of Western culture, we've been socialized to follow the rules, and the rules that are written by other people in another time with other identities. And sometimes that can actually lead us to do the wrong thing in terms of right relationships. So anyway.
And Todd has a question in the chat. Was there a moment or moments of insight that occurred during your writing of the book that fundamentally changed your relationship with any of the principles of right use of power?
Yes. One is the one I just named, and the kind of spiritual orientation or larger frame, but also the kind of orienting the work of right use of power towards right relationship. I think that was a really fundamental shift for me internally, because I am on the spectrum and I love to just learn things, and I am a nerd that way. And so I could talk about power in an academic way all day long, and it's really fun for me. But to orient it and point it back to, what's the point? Is it just to have a bunch of knowledge about power, or is it to actually do what we're meant to do here together? And I think that answer, what we're meant to do here together, is different for all of us, but I think it all has to do with relationship in some way. So thanks for that question, Todd.
Yeah. Any final questions that come up for folks before we move into our toast? So go get your beverage if you don't have it, or if you drank it all, need a new one. Any final questions anybody has? Yeah, Joel.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious to hear your perspective, Amanda, on having written the book and how you suggest people take in the book. I often, after trainings or reading or taking in the right use of power information, often feel very full and a lot of unlearning that has to happen and along with the learning. So I'm just curious from your perspective, I know everyone's different, every learner is different, but just to hear what your thoughts are on how to take it in, absorb it, listen to it? Just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to know that this is just a bunch of stuff from my perspective. And I mentioned this in the book, but there's this Buddhist concept of the finger pointing to the moon, and we get caught up in looking at the finger instead of what the finger is pointing to. And what the finger is pointing to is your own kind of relationship with power and your own understanding, and holding what I write not as the expert or anything like that, but as invitations to explore what your thoughts are around it or how that shows up for you. I do include some reflection questions in there. It's dense, especially part 2. Yeah, go slowly. I tend to inhale books. As my partner can attest, I read way too many books and I like zoom through them. But I'm learning to slow down as we're reminded by you. So just slow down. And yeah, that's what comes to mind. Thanks for that question.
Great. And Maggie had asked in the chat, what's the best way to get the book? And I was just trying to grab the link. Here we go. It's a pre-sale right now, and I know we're working on the Amazon book for
Yes.
our Across the Seas folks.
Yes. Amazon is giving me trouble, and I am extremely frustrated, and I don't want to put it on there anyway, but I have to because that's the easiest way for people in other countries to get it. So I'm working on that, and I appreciate your patience. The printed books are on their way. So if you've ordered it already, you should receive it in the next week or so if you're in the United States. And if you're in another country and you're anxious to get the book, then can you email me? And I will figure out a creative solution. But it is coming for those who want it, in other countries.
Do we have time for a question before we go into the toast in the end?
Universal power feels like such a profound and tender offering and the expansion of our model. So I'm curious, as people begin to root more into more of their actions into universal power rather than their role and status, and personal also, just the personal, what kinds of shifts do you see or imagine in their relational behavior on the ability to stay connected to themselves and to right relationship?
It's revolutionary, or it has been for me. And whatever revolution we're going to experience in our lifetimes, I think has to be connected to that in some way. It completely shifts all of it. And really the foundation of it is belonging, like that inherent belongingness that we have to have if we're going to change any of the systems. And inherent belongingness brings a kind of peace that we don't get anywhere else. And as a psychotherapist, the thing that I hear or see, and the other therapists in the room can probably resonate with this, but what we see over and over again is the core issue really is, do I belong? Am I loved? And connection to universal power answers that every moment if we're listening. And that's revolutionary.
Thanks, Key. The time has come to raise your water, your tea, your Diet Coke, if you're me, and toast to Dr. Amanda and this powerful offering. May it guide us ever closer to right relationship with ourselves, each other, and the systems we inhabit. May its legacy be one of awakened hearts, courageous repair, and a world reshaped by wise and compassionate use of power. Cheers! Hooray!
Hey.
Amazing. Okay, now we have goodies for you. So to thank you for showing up, we're giving everybody a 50% off coupon for the book and a 50% off coupon for any basics training. And you can use this, or you can use it for yourself, or you can gift it to somebody else. So let me put these in the chat for you. So the 50% off any basics training, one per user, never expires. That's WAT 50. And then 50% off the book is going to expire on December 5th. And that's also one per user, SPG 50. And we have put all of your names in a raffle for some prizes. So you get to choose what prize you want. You can get a one-to-one power conscious coaching session with Amanda. You can get a free basics tuition, or you can get a free book. So Steph, are you ready to choose the names out of the hat?
So Steph actually
Oh.
wrote down all these names and put them in a basket for me and then just carried them to me just now. So thank you,
That's
Steph.
amazing. Okay.
So
drum roll.
I will choose a name. Maya.
Maya. Yay.
Yay.
Lovely.
And I'm going to choose two more. Yay.
Eileen. And last but not
And
least,
the last is Rosanna.
Rosanna.
Yeah.
Hooray. So you get to choose what it is that you want, and we will reach out to you and make sure that you know how to collect. If you haven't gotten your book yet and you're in the US, do make sure that you purchase the book on the pre-sale that will hopefully arrive at some point this week. And I think that's all we got, right, Amanda? Do you want to give us your final words?
Yeah, the final word is the quote that is also in Cedar's book, which is also in the front of my book, which is the biggest frame for the work and for the book. This is a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with the denial of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. It is precisely this collision of immoral power with powerless morality which constitutes the major crisis of our times.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here, everybody. We're going to stay on for just a couple minutes. So if you have any other well wishes for Amanda or blessings for the book, you can put them in the chat or stay on and say them out loud. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for being here. Bye, y'all.